Hello, my name is Travis Marcella. I'm currently 16 years old. Today is March 4th, 2023, and I never expected to be making entries of my life since it was pretty average, but something strange has been happening recently. I'll try to explain what's happening as best as I can. I was riding my bicycle one evening, my backpack barely hanging onto my shoulders as I went as fast as I could to go home in the pouring rain. I eventually reached my father's cabin and I quickly scrambled inside. "Dad!" I called out. There was no answer, and to my dismay, my father was sleeping on the couch. I shook him until he woke up. Today was my birthday, and I wasn't going to let him sleep through it. What, Travis, what are you doing?" He said, confused. "Dad, it's my birthday, come on," I said, quickly running into the kitchen and grabbing some candles. I then ran back to my backpack and took out a slightly crushed cake. I set it on the table and started placing the candles on top. 14, 15, 16! "Dad, you got all the candles!" I shouted excitedly. My father grumbled as he took out his lighter and set the candles ablaze. I watched intently as flames flickered ever so slightly. We sang the birthday song. Well, I sang it and he hummed along, and I blew out my candles. I, being 16 years old, obviously wished for a girlfriend. We got some snacks together and watched TV in the living room. A couple of hours later, my father was asleep again and I was watching some 90s horror films. I glanced out the window and, to my shock, I saw a shadow out of the corner of my eye. I screamed and shook my dad. He woke up and I told him what happened, and he immediately grabbed his shotgun and slammed open the front door. He just ran off into the night and left me alone for what felt like hours. Eventually he came back and told me he had some new house rules in a serious tone. At first, I was confused, but then he pulled out a piece of paper and gave it to me. There were only 5 rules, but they were odd nonetheless. Rule 1. Do not go outside at night. Rule 2. If you see anything strange, tell me. Rule 3. Lock the front door before midnight. Rule 4. Do not respond to any odd sounds, no matter how human they seem. Rule 5. If you ever encounter any... The rest of the rule was scratched out. I read these rules more than 5 times, trying to understand these rules clearly, but to no avail. "Dad, these rules, don't they seem a bit odd?" I asked. "No. These are the rules you must follow." He said that last part loudly. I was confused, but I dismissed the weird situation and followed the rules. The next couple of days at school were pretty normal, but whenever I was home, I kept seeing these shadows out of the corner of my eye. It really freaks me out, but my father says it's my imagination playing tricks on me. I think he's keeping something from me. The next day, I was at school when Daniel Parker bumped into me, thrusting all of my books and school supplies on the floor. I rushed to pick them up while he laughed and walked away. I gritted my teeth and held back my rage. Was there no teachers to deal with this idiot? I thought. I heard later that day that there was a test coming up that was giving the highest score $500. The best part is that it was only for kids with a C+ average or below. I was always a C+ student, so I had the advantage. The test was in 3 days, and we were all given study notes. I went to get on my bike to ride home that day, only to find out somebody had graffitied all over my bike and stolen my tires. I gritted my teeth and accidentally bit my cheek. Cursing myself, I grabbed my bike and dragged it home. I walked home, and as I was coming up to my house, I saw another shadow in the corner of my eyes, running off into the backyard. I ran after it. I watched as it ran deep into the forest that surrounded the cabin that my father and I lived in. I went to run after it, but I felt something grab my shoulder. I turned around and seen my father. He looked extremely pale and held his shotgun in his hand. "Dad, did you see it?" I said hysterically, almost questioning my sanity. "What are you talking about?" He lied. "I saw a deer." He stated and began to chase after the shadow. I watched in shock as my father chased after the shadow with no fear in his eyes. Maybe he did see a deer and I'm just going insane. I lay awake that night thinking about what was happening. I could almost hear the shadows laughing at me, trying to figure out if they were real or not. I took out my phone and scrolled through my contacts. Still empty. What was I even expecting? I watched some old cartoons. Old cartoons always calm me down, even as a baby. They just looked cool to me, I guess. I got a decent night of rest despite the circumstances. I woke up and realized I had not studied at all and only had 2 days until the test. I had my mind on studying all day, but all my hope for studying was shattered when Daniel Parker bumped into me again. Nothing happened, and I sighed in relief and realized in horror that my study notes were missing. I turned back to see him smiling as he ripped up my notes to shreds and threw them out. I wanted to punch him so badly. I wanted him to hurt so badly, but I gritted my teeth and sighed in defeat. I had to walk home as my bike still wasn't fixed. My father promised to get me some tires today, and I doubted that he would even keep his word. To my surprise, I walked home to see him wide awake, sober, and new tires in the corner of the room. He even helped me put the tires back onto my bike. I felt something was off though. Usually my father was drunk or sleeping, but he seemed much more alert and always had his shotgun near. I saw his trigger finger tensing up randomly. I thanked my dad for the tires and immediately went to my room. Something was off with my dad, and I expected him to be drunk, but I watched as he just kept staring at the windows as if something was playing peekaboo. I considered that he might be seeing the shadows as well, but that didn't explain why. My thoughts were interrupted by a knocking on the window. I turned to see the pitch black night, but something was off. I squinted and I swear that I could make out 8 eyes staring back. I screamed as I immediately realized whatever it was trying to open the window. I quickly ran to the window and locked it before it got inside. I watched as it scraped its spider-like limbs across the window like daggers. I backed away as the window started to crack. I called out to my father, but then I heard a shot go off. These things, they were getting into the house. I quickly ran out of the room to see my father struggling to fend off a giant spider that broke through a nearby window. I ran to my father's aid, and he pointed his finger towards a shotgun on the table nearby. I ran to it but stopped almost a foot away before another spider fell from the ceiling almost on top of me. I stood in complete shock as it scurried closer. It was around 4 feet in size and was as wide as the table behind it. It lunged at me and I ducked as it flew over my head. It landed right behind me and I quickly made a grab for the shotgun. I was able to grab the shotgun as the spider charged, but I was faster. I shot the spider right in its face and quickly finished off the other spider that my dad was fighting. I thought it was over when I heard my bedroom window shatter. My blood ran cold as a spider emerged from my room and was charging straight towards me. The shotgun my father owned only held 2 shells at a time, and now it looked like I was about to be trampled when, right as it was about to ram into me, a large fire axe slammed into its body and crushed its head. I looked at my father, but all I saw was cold, distant eyes. He brought me to my bedroom after boarding up my window and told me to tell nobody about this. I can hear him right now, fixing up the damage from the spiders. I have to tell somebody about this, and that's why I'm posting it here. I'm unsure what to make of what's happening, but I'll keep in touch. I promise. I didn't sleep well that night, but it didn't really matter anyways. My father made me stay home so I could process what happened or whatever. I honestly don't feel safe around him anymore. It's like he's an entirely different person. I snooped around his room and found some strange documents about some research facility. I'm not completely sure, but I didn't get a good look at it as my father was about to enter the room. I hid in the closet until he left, which took a painfully long time. As I went back to my room, I remembered the rules my father had told me about and realized I probably broke Rule 4. I had screamed when I saw one of the creatures, but that didn't explain how those creatures got in downstairs. I assumed that the door wasn't locked or my father had responded to one of the things. I walked out of my room and attempted to open the door. No luck. My father had locked us inside the house for some reason. I searched for my father to confront him, but he had left the cabin without me realizing. Dad, I yelled but got no response. I looked out the window to see the sun was setting. My heart dropped as I realized that my dad's shotgun was also gone. I watched as the sun completely disappeared on the horizon. Night was approaching. I banged on the front door, desperately hoping that it would break and I could go find my father. It was a stupid idea, but surprisingly, it worked. I felt a rush of cool air as I realized how cold it was. I went to get a coat but went against it as I realized my father could be in danger at this very moment. I ran off to the tree line behind the cabin and looked for any sign of my father. I saw that there were footprints in the ground that resembled my father's boots. I followed the trail into the forest. After following the trail for a while, I started seeing shadows out of the corner of my eyes. I shuddered at the thought of being chased and started picking up my pace. The shadows seemed to be getting closer and closer until I could almost swear I was seeing them. I kept running when suddenly the shadows hurtled forward and landed a couple feet in front of me. I heard a guttural screech that made me sick to my stomach. I watched as 5 giant spiders crawled towards me. No! No, 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 no! I screamed as they were almost a foot away from me now. Suddenly I watched as the ground beneath me started cracking and 2 giant brown claws emerged from the ground, crushing all 5 spiders, and then they tried to attack me as well. I barrel rolled out of the way just in time to dodge the giant claws as they crashed back into the earth. Seeing that danger was at every corner, I ran faster as I continued following my father's footsteps, and they eventually led me into a clearing. The clearing was pretty empty except for a small warehouse in the middle of it. I ran to it and opened the door to see my father on an old-looking computer typing in a report file. "Dad," I said before being immediately cut off. "What the hell are you doing here, Travis?" He yelled hysterically. We both turned to the open door behind us to see about 8 large shadows heading in our direction. You led them to us?" He screamed as he grabbed his shotgun. "Dad, I'm so sorry. I was just worried about you. You broke one of the rules," I protested. "You're right. I should not have provoked them in the first place. I wish I didn't have to burden you with this, Travis." He sighed. "Burden me with what?" I asked. "Go to the computer and type in 1001. It'll send an emergency response team to this location and maybe, just maybe, we'll be saved. Stay in the warehouse and do not leave," he commanded. Dad, wait, what about you?" I asked, but he was already gone. "I'm gonna distract them for as long as possible," he shouted back at me. We parted ways as I closed and locked the warehouse door. I quickly typed in 1001 on the computer and a code orange was sent to someone called Site Director. I quickly turned to the only window in the warehouse and stared out, hoping I could see if my father was okay, and all I saw was the impossible amount of shadows headed towards where my father ran. I hadn't even heard any gunshots yet. I tried to process what was happening as I sat down on the floor and started hyperventilating. During the past couple days, I've been questioning my sanity as these shadow spiders or whatever were stalking me and my father. Now, I'm trapped in my dad's secret warehouse where he works for some kind of facility. I tried to wrap my head around all of this when I heard the first gunshot, followed by a screech so loud that my ears felt like they were on fire. I covered my ears as more gunshots rang out into the night as well as several more screeches. After a while, to my horror, I stopped hearing any gunshots. I heard the sound of scuttling feet, way too many feet as the shadows approached the warehouse. I stopped looking out the window at this point and hid under my father's desk as the shadows climbed around the warehouse, searching for a way inside. I saw that a shadow had blacked out the window's light. I knew the end was near. Surprisingly, I faintly heard the sound of a helicopter in the distance, followed by what felt like a minigun barreling many bullets into the hull of the warehouse, obliterating many of the shadows in the process. Someone kicked down the door and searched the room. It took a couple of minutes before the person found me and escorted me out of the warehouse. They told me to get into the helicopter as all I could do was follow their instructions. We flew for what felt like hours and eventually landed on top of some large building that looked like some abandoned office complex. Me and 4 other people climbed down a ladder that led to the front door of the building. I asked if my father was okay, but I was completely ignored and ushered into some kind of large closet that held a single bed with a desk, a chair, a computer, and a bookcase that was filled with books about a bunch of random things like A Beginner's Guide to Cryptozoology and How to Shoot a Gun. These books were strange, but luckily I also found some comic books. I wanted answers, but I was stuck in this room and I had no more control in this situation. For the first time in a long time, I cried. This whole situation seems like a fever dream and I don't even know if my father is okay. Yeah, he might have been drunk a lot, but still, he was my father. I banged on the door, but it was locked and made of what looks like steel. I guess the silver lining is the computer allows me access to the internet, so I'm posting again like I promised. I'm not sure what to do at this point, but I will keep in touch with you all.